Welcome to episode 57 of the Empowering Ability Podcast.
You are listening to the Empowering Ability Podcast and raising expectations for what is possible for people with developmental disabilities. Here is your host, my brother Elda.
Hey there, thanks for joining. Today, I bring you this bonus episode from a video I recorded to help bring you additional insights and learning on how to create the best life for your loved one with a developmental or intellectual disability, an elevated life, and helping us to elevate expectations for people with developmental or intellectual disabilities. And in this lesson, I might have been using a whiteboard or referring to a drawing or a graphic that you will not be able to see in this audio. So if you hear that, that is why, because it's shot in video. But nonetheless, I think there's still a lot of value that you can get from this lesson. In this lesson, I helped to break down the myth that we have to accept what is offered by kind of your typical organization, typical agency organization around the typical placement and coverage model, and work to share with you that there's another option, which is the option in community. And I get into talking about how to think about this and how to create a vision for your loved one that's best for them, that's optimal for them, and how to do that. So let's get into it. Here's a lesson. Hey there, Eric Ball here. Thank you to all of you that watched and commented and sent me questions about the last video on how to create and deepen relationships. It was really exciting to see the engagement with that video. And today I'm here to talk to you more about the vision that we all have for our loved ones with an intellectual or developmental disability. And I know you want the absolute best for your loved one with a disability, and I want the absolute best for my sister, who has a intellectual and physical disability. And I want the best for everybody that has a intellectual or developmental disability. I want to help them access the good things in life, and I want to help your family along that path. And I mean, it's really obvious that we all want our loved ones to have great relationships in their lives, and not just paid relationships, so reciprocal and non-paid relationships. And we want our loved ones to be able to experience those good things in life. We want them to be able to have a loving home. We want them to live interdependently and not just be reliant on us, but, just like all of us, to be interdependent, so reliant on other people in our lives, many other people in our lives, and living collaboratively. And that's an exciting vision, exciting idea that I'm bringing forward to you and wanting to put in place. And also to help our loved ones to create a meaningful life for themselves. And we want people to be there for our loved one when we can no longer be there as well. And so really to sum it up, the vision that I have for our loved ones with an intellectual or developmental disability is for them to have a happy life, a full life, and a life in relationship that isn't completely reliant on us, and at least not forever. And there's going to be some work that we need to do to make that happen, so that there's full, lively, vibrant relationships in our loved ones' lives. And I know that we can make this happen, because I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've seen it with my friend Sam. I've seen this transformation happening for my sister. And I see it happening with the young adults that I work with on a weekly basis. And just want to briefly share with you a story of a young man that I work with, Nick. So if we look at Nick's life going back, even just to, a short 8 months ago to the summer. And Nick was a part of a program which he quite enjoyed, and he would go there and be there with staff and other people with um, intellectual or developmental disabilities, and they would play games and do other things, kind of I'd say camp-ish like, and a segregated environment, and so that's what Nick's life looked like, living with mom and dad as well. And started working with Nick about 6 months ago, and his life has undergone a huge transformation. If you look at Nick's calendar today, it's filled with doing volunteering twice a week at a food bank, and helping to help set up for a seniors event on a weekly basis. It's working towards getting a paid job. So Nick's on the cusp of securing paid work, which is really exciting. Every Saturday, he's involved in a community park run, which he loves, and he's formed a role as a tail walker, right, making sure nobody's left behind, and really, fielding a valuable role for that group. And Nick's on the verge of having his own home as well. So really a massive shift in Nick's life. And if you look at his calendar, how he was spending his time just 8 months ago to now, a massive change. And I think the key to that change, the fundamental pivoting point for Nick and for my friend Sam and for my sister and for all the other people that I'm working with, is creating this life-giving vision. And I want to talk more to that. But before I do, I want to circle back on an idea that I spoke about in the last video. And Dana actually left a comment on that video about the idea of investing in relationships. And Dana really felt that was an important point to stress with our families. And so I want to talk about this idea of investing versus consumption. Now, I was fortunate enough to to spend some time with David Hasbury. And this is something that David really stresses, the idea of investment versus consumption. So I'm going to start with consumption. So consumption of resources, of support, of energy, of funding being consumed. So I want you to think about consumption in terms of placement and coverage. So what does placement and coverage mean? Well, it simply means a place to go and someone to watch over you, someone to cover you, right? So think the traditional ways we've been schooled around what's available for our loved ones with a disability. So we're talking group home, we're talking a program, we're talking a day program, a life skills program, right? So those are the things that we're talking about in terms of placement and coverage, a place to go and someone to watch over. And the idea of placement and coverage is sold to us because it's efficient. So we group a bunch of people together, we segregate people with disabilities away from everybody else, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people look over them. So we look at it and we say, oh, that's an efficient use of money, because now it's, there might be 3 people with disabilities and we're only paying for 1 staff, to a 3-to-1 ratio. And it's also efficient because it's easy, it exists. I can just pay for that thing, right? And as a family member, if our loved one has care needs, someone else will take care of those care needs, and I can do the things that I need to do, like go to work. So I completely understand that. However, I want us to think about what is the result that we get from a placement and coverage model. What's the result we get from a group home? What's the result we get from a day program? And that result is relief for the day, right? So they have something to do for the day, and then the next day we start off in the exact same spot. So it's a consumption of your resources. And there isn't much that results from that. So there isn't much in terms of skills gained, in terms of life experience, trying different things and seeing how the world works. There isn't much of a result in terms of new relationships built. And if you compare it to investing, right, it's a poor investment because it doesn't yield any returns. It's like investing in a junk bond. So you put that money in that bond, and you're lucky if you get back what you put in it. So to give you a parallel in terms of investing, so you're not getting anything from this investment. Now, the other option that I want us to consider is the path of community. So, the path of community is exploring an individual's interest, what they're truly interested in, and doing that in typical and ordinary places. And I spoke to this in the last video in terms of building relationships. So, this provides a great opportunity to build relationships with other people that are interested in the same things that you are. Right? In the story of Nick, it leads to exploring paid work and getting paid work. It leads to volunteering. And this is really an investment, right? Because we're seeing some dividends from it. We're seeing if you get, if we're investing that support, those resources in exploring paid work, then yes, the return on that investment is a paycheck. That's a tangible dividend. It might be in the way of contributing in a volunteer role, which gives person meaning to their day, meaning to their life. The investment in relationships, right, which yield further dividends. Maybe because of those relationships down the road, you're no longer paying for support because your loved one's doing that in a non-paid relationship and enjoying that activity with somebody else. So think about the path of community as the path of investment and the path of getting a return on your investment, on your resources. I also want to tell you that as families, we've been sold a false bag of goods. We're schooled and we're sold on the idea that this placement and coverage model that exists, so again, somewhere to go and someone to watch over us, is the way to go. And we're told that that's the only option. We're also have this false belief that it's the safe option, that our loved one will be well looked after, well cared for, if someone's paid to look after them. But what the research actually shows is that people are more vulnerable when they're in this placement and coverage model because the people that are looking after them are simply paid. That's the only connection that they have to these individuals with disabilities versus the community route, the relationship route, where you're in relationship with someone that truly cares about you, right? So we're talking about the difference between someone being paid to care and someone caring because they love that person and are in relationship. And love is a lot more safe than somebody just being paid to look after someone. So there's a big fundamental difference there, and I wanted to point out that false belief that's sold to us as families. So I really strongly tried to make the case here to help you to choose the route of going down the path to investing in the community and exploring a person's interest. And this is not an easy path either because it takes energy, it takes work, and it takes a while to see any results. So it's a long-term strategy. We might be doing it for a while before we realize any results. So it's not an easy path by any means either. So I've made my case to the path of community. Now, how do you go do this, right? Sounds great, but how do you do it? It really all starts with vision. And I'm going to give you a quick crash course on vision to get you started here. Now, why do we need vision? Vision can kind of sound fluffy, or it can sound, oh, that's for people that are, just into personal development and just care about themselves. I'm going to tell you no. You need a vision to know where you're going. And I want to give you a metaphor, right? So think about a surfer on a surfboard. And maybe it's a new surfer, they're a little unsure, unsteady. They're getting up on the board and they're maybe, not the best of control. They're not, surfing and carving the waves yet. They're just kind of riding them. And this kind of new nervous surfer's looking forward, and they see the beach over here and they see the rocks over here. And if that surfer stares at the rocks, they're going to end up on the rocks. If they stare at the beach, if they look at the beach, they're going to end up on the beach, right? They're going to take a step off their surfboard into that soft sand. But if they stare at the rocks, they're going to head at the rocks, right? So it's all about, in your mind, being able to think about where you're going. And if you're able to see where you're going, you start to walk in that direction. And that's really the importance of vision, right? We're very visual creatures. We have to be able to see, we have to be able to envision what that life could look like in your mind. That's why I told you the story of my sister in the last video. That's why I told you the story of Nick in this video, to help you see that other people are creating lives like this in community. And now you need to be able to do that for yourself, right? Because your loved one with a disability doesn't want the same life as Nick. They don't want the same life as my sister Sarah. They don't want the same life as my friend Sam that I mentioned earlier. They want their own life that follows their own interests. So, how do we create this vision, right? So, I'm telling you, it's based on the individual. It has to be based on the individual's interests. We can't just copy and paste Sarah's life and give that to your loved one. We need to think about what your loved one truly wants for themselves. And there's a concept that I want to share with you, which Michael Kendrick spoke about on my podcast, which is social role valorization. So this is a social theory created by a man named Wolf Wolfensberger. And Wolf created this theory to help people that are devalued and marginalized by our society to create more value roles and become valued contributing members in our society. And it's a proven way to do that. So a key concept from social role valorization is called the culturally valued analog. And this is super important. Now, culturally valued analog is simply what would the average person of the same age typically be doing with their life? So on the podcast, Michael Kendrick gave the example, a 6-year-old, what would they typically be doing? Well, they would be going to school and they'd be in the role of student in a typical classroom. What would a 25-year-old be doing in our society? Well, a 25-year-old would be typically furthering their studies, or they would have a job, right? So that's what the culturally valued analog is. So it just gives you a frame to look at for your loved one. What would a typical person of that age be doing with their life in society? And using that as a frame of reference rather than just looking at, well, what is the disability version of that? Or, what have we been sold as the only options for our loved one? A culturally valued analog opens up thousands of options for your loved one to live an awesome life and to explore their interests within that. So when I was working with Nick and his family, we started to think through what were the typical ordinary things that a young man of Nick's age would be doing in their community, and according to what are Nick's interests. So it was really starting with deeply understanding Nick and understanding what Nick's interests are, what Nick is good at, and what are the things that Nick wants to try, and looking at with those things, where do those things happen in typical ordinary community? And we looked at all the different areas of Nick's life, or different domains. So an example of domains of our lives are things like career, home, family, friends, leisure, health, finances, just to give you a starting point, right? So you can kind of take all those domains that are important to that individual, what their interests are, and write this big, bold vision for what life could look like in each of those domains using that culturally valued analog. So what's typical, ordinary, normative for a person of that age in our society, and create a big, bold, optimal vision for that individual, just like we did with Nick and his family to create a vision for what that your loved one can live into. And I want you to think big. Think 5 years out and think to the point of, oh, I don't even know if that's possible, right? That's the point of thinking that you want to get to, because we underestimate what somebody can achieve in 5 years. And we overestimate what somebody can achieve in the short term in 1 to 3 years. So we can often be disappointed by not achieving our goals in the short term, but we realize that we can blow past our 5 year goals in 3 years, 4 years, because we're not thinking big enough. So I want you to think 5 years out, think really big. And this will be a great starting point to creating that vision. So it creates that North Star, or creates that marker out here for you. And you can see it, you can visualize it. And as you visualize it, you start to take steps walking toward it. And that helps us move forward into that life. And I want you to think about optimal life. Now, I'll often hear from families, well, with their disability, they can't just do that. And they can't do that because of their disability. I often hear that a lot from, my family as well, with my sister. And you're right. If we don't believe that our loved one can do that, then they can't. Because we will place those low expectations on them, and we won't give them the opportunity to do that thing, or to live into that dream, or to chase that vision. So we have to really hold high expectations. We need to elevate our expectations of our loved ones so that they can live into that vision, they can live into that optimal life. We need to have those elevated high expectations. And when we do that, it gives our loved one the opportunity to live into those expectations, and we need to be those champions. The other thing that I hear from families is that we don't have the money or the support to do this. Well, I'm going to argue that it really isn't going to cost you much or cost you anything to create this vision, right? It's going to take some time and some thinking and some pen and a paper, which isn't going to cost you very much to start to do this thinking. And and you've already invested the time to watch this video. So take the next step and start to think about what this vision is. Don't worry about the how. You don't need to worry about the how right now. Just create that vision. Set the course first, and then after that, you can start to pick some small steps that you want to take and figure out the how to those. The other thing that I want to add to vision is it's great to do it in a group, because one mind is only going to come up with limited ideas, limited possibilities. But when you have multiple minds and the individual with you, you can create many more ideas, many more possibilities, and a much bigger, grander vision. The other beautiful thing about that is when you do that visioning process with people, they'll start to roll up their sleeves, right? And offer up, oh, I could help with that, or I'm interested in that same thing. Maybe we can try that together. So when we talk about doing this with other people, we start getting into the topic of personal support networks. And this is a question that I've been getting asked about a lot. So I've created this mental model of personal support networks, and I'm going to share it with you. But you're going to have to sit tight. I'm going to share it with you in the next video that'll be coming soon, in a couple of days. And I'll talk about that mental model of personal support networks, how to start building a personal support network, how to build out a personal support network, and then how to maintain, how to utilize, how to get a support network functioning. So I'm excited to bring that to you. So keep an eye out for that video coming soon. And I would love to hear from you. So, thank you so much for watching the video, and I would love to hear your comments. So in the comment section below, drop me a comment there, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. I will reply to your comment, and I'd love to talk about this stuff. So any questions that you have as well, put them in the comment section. And thanks so much for watching this video. I'm excited to continue this journey, this work, and together, let's continue to elevate the lives of people that have disabilities.